Next up, let's talk about string methods. So we haven't really talked about methods at all. Methods are kind of like built-in pieces of functionality, built-in actions that can be performed on a certain thing, a particular value, or in our case, on any string. So we can do things like search for a particular string within a string. Does this string contain a $? We can replace parts of a string. We can change case from lowercase to uppercase to all caps. We can remove additional spacing if we want to get rid of spacing. There's a bunch of these different features that come built in with every single string. And they all follow this format. So we have a string dot some method name with opening and closing parentheses. And to be clear, strings are not the only things that have methods. There are number methods that are built in. They're just not as useful, so I'm not going to talk about them just yet. String methods, however, are really useful, so I'm going to cover some of the most important ones. If we go to MDN and we look at string, it's under the JavaScript reference, built-in objects, string. On the left-hand side, you'll see a very long list of methods. Each one of these is an action we can perform on every single string. So we could take a look at one of them like to uppercase or to lowercase, like this one. Before I do that, I just want to mention these thumbs down mean that you shouldn't really use these anymore. They're deprecated. They still work because JavaScript needs to support older websites. They still need to work in the browser, even though you're not really supposed to use these anymore. But those withstanding, there's still quite a few different methods that we have access to. So here's one, to uppercase. And the way that we call it is on a certain string dot to uppercase, open, close, parens. So let's make a variable called message. We'll set it to you are so grounded, mister, like that. And we'll hit enter. If we call message dot to uppercase, I'm just going to use autocomplete. So TOU tab, and then parens. This is what we get. We get a new version, a new string. So to be clear, the original is unchanged. Remember that strings are immutable. We can't change the first character. We can't change any character manually. Same thing here. If we uppercase a string, we are creating a new string, or we're getting a reference to a new string that is the same content, just uppercased. So if we wanted to save that to the variable, we could do message equals message.toUppercase. Or we could just make a new variable called yell or uppercase message or something like that. Now I have message and it's been updated. Let's quickly talk about those parens. They're really, really important. If you leave them off, it's not going to work. It won't throw an error. It won't break your code, but you're not actually executing that action. You're just sort of asking JavaScript, does that action exist? So we also have a to lowercase. And if I call it, we get, you are so grounded, mister, lowercased. Remember, message is now uppercased. But if we do it without the parens, just message.toLowercase, JavaScript just tells me, yeah, that's a thing. There's some code for to lowercase. It's an action, a function. Do you want me to call it? It's not even asking if we want to call it, but that's kind of how I personify it. And if you do want to call it, you need those parens. So that's to uppercase and to lowercase. I have a slide on that as well. Remember, the original value is unchanged unless you manually set the variable using the return value from to uppercase or to lowercase. And then the second method we'll look at for now is called trim. Trim is very simple. It just removes leading and trailing white space. So spaces at the beginning and end of a string. When you call trim, it returns a string where that space has been removed. So it's not going to remove all spaces. Let's do let color equals purple with some spaces in there. I'll even hit tab a couple times, just like that. Now if I call color.trim with parens, it removes those spaces. Color is still unchanged, of course, as we've seen before. And another thing we can do is we can call trim, and then on top of that, we can chain on another method call like to uppercase. So trim will run first, which takes this string and it returns a version with no spaces on either end. Then we're basically calling purple this dot to uppercase. So this goes first, and then to uppercase runs on whatever this returned. So we end up with purple, no space, and all caps. A quick note about trim: if you have spaces in the middle of the word, like this, it is not going to remove those. It only removes the leading and trailing spaces while keeping all other spaces intact. Those are the first two string methods. In the next video, we have a different batch that works slightly differently. But remember, all these methods, whether we're working with a string, a number, or something else, like when we get to arrays, objects, they all have a set of built-in methods, built-in actions. We call them by referencing a thing, a string, an array, dot, a method name with parens. Cool.